First, just to begin, just to thank Rabbi Rothman again for for being involved in the whole arrangement of this series, Kosher 2 for sponsoring it, for taping it, and again the sponsors for sponsoring it. I was just thinking that it used to be when someone sponsored a shir, a suda, so whatever the zechus was for whatever a person will get influenced by coming to that shir, and how he would then influence other people afterwards from taking the ideas of the shir and then spreading those ideas. But now when one sponsors something, it has such a much greater zechus, because it doesn't just stop at the shir. Now people can watch it all over the world, and therefore the zechus, the merit that people have, the neshamas have for someone sponsoring in their merit, just continues and continues for who knows what the impact, for who knows how long. When we speak about the Corbin, there's a medrash. The medrash says that there was in the neighborhood of Reb Gamliel, that there was a widow who had an only child. And obviously this woman invested much into her child, and all her life was about the child. She lived for the child, and then one day this child was nifter, the child died. And the Medrash tells us how that each night that she would cry and wail over this child, and at night when her voice would carry until Reb Gamliel, who lived in the neighborhood, would hear the cries and would be affected by the cries, and he would also begin to cry with this woman, with this widow. She would cry over her child, and he would cry over the Beis HaMikdash. What's the connection? Why is he crying over the Beis HaMikdash when she's crying over her child? If Reb Gamliel is affected by her cries of her pain, of her sorrow, so then seemingly he should cry also over her pain. Why does her crying trigger his crying over the Beis HaMikdash? And if he wanted to mourn over the Beis HaMikdash, so then he should cry over the Beis HaMikdash without having to hear her cries. Why is he crying because of her crying? And it seems that the lesson of this medrash, that the medrash wants to tell us is that all the suffering that the Jewish people have, all the national tragedies, even personal tragedies, could be linked back and are rooted in the Beis HaMikdash, in the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And so therefore when this woman cried over her child, Reb Gamliel also cried over her child. But Reb Gamliel didn't cry over her specific tragedy, but this root at the source of all the tragedies of the Jewish people, and her tragedy as well. And that's why Reb Gamliel, upon hearing her cries, cried over the Beis HaMikdash. So seemingly this is the reason why we mourn the Corbin. If you go through the Kinos all go through all the national tragedies, the Inquisitions, the pogroms, because when we mourn the Beis HaMikdash, we mourn not only the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, but the ensuing tragedies. That's seemingly why we mourn the Beis HaMikdash. But if we go through the different Gemaras, the Gemara seems to give us a different picture. There's a Gemara, the Gemara tells us in Baba Kama, it recounts a very interesting story. It says there was an individual, there was a Moira Tana Eliezer Zeira. His name was Eliezer the Small One, and he got this title. This is a description of him, that he was humble, that he was honored, that he considered himself small. So Havi Sayim Misani Ukmi. So he used to walk around. It used to be in those days they would wear white shoes. He walked around with black shoes. V'kai B'shuki Nardan. He would walk around publicly wearing black shoes. Nowadays it's different. But he would walk around wearing black shoes. Ashkachu de Reish Galusa, so these Reish Galusa, the people of the house of Reish Galusa, these were people appointed to ensure that the community kept the mitzvahs and followed the dictates of Hashem. And they found him, V'yamarlei Maishna Hamini Misadi, why are you different? Why are you acting differently? Why are you wearing black shoes when the rest of the community is wearing white shoes? Why are you trying to stand out? Why do you put yourself on a pedestal above the rest of the community? Amar Lahudika Avilna Yerushalayim, because I'm mourning the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. I'm mourning the tragedy of the loss. I'm mourning the Corbin. So this seems to be such a commendable thing. Then beyond the 3 weeks, He's going and mourning the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. He's mourning it publicly. He's wearing black shoes as a sign of mourning. When someone mourns, they wear black. So this seems to be such a wonderful thing, something that one should strive to be. But that's not how they took it. Savar Yuara, they thought this was gaiva. That again, he was putting himself on a pedestal that he held himself to be greater than the rest of the community, and therefore v'chashvu, they locked him up. Someone who has arrogance is a threat to society. Maybe society will learn from him. So therefore, he had to be taken away from society. He had to be locked up. So Amar Lehu Gavarabana, I'm a great person. Meaning they felt that he wasn't such a great person. He hid his humbleness. He hid his level. Through his humbleness, he hid his level so well that even the sages couldn't recognize how great he was. And therefore, he had to tell them, I'm a great person. It's befitting of me, someone of my stature, someone on my level. It's befitting that I mourn the temple, not only during the 3 weeks, but throughout the year as well. And then he goes and he proves to them. They ask him a question. There's a halachic debate whether he is considered a great person or he's not considered a great person. But that's the Gemara, and it seems just odd. So this doesn't seem the response of someone who's humble. Someone who's humble won't make a point of saying how great he is. He won't make a point of saying, I'm this great individual, I have a tremendously high level. But we see that that's not the idea of humbleness. That humbleness doesn't mean that you're not aware of what level you're on, that you're not sure of your talents, of your skills, but rather it's to recognize one's talents and one's abilities, recognize one's level that he's on, but not focus on it should be a reason to be praised, but it's a reason to have more obligations. That once the higher one's level is, then the more obligations that come with the level. And therefore, and that was where Eliezer Zahira said, it's true I'm humble, but humbleness doesn't mean that I don't recognize who I am. I recognize who I am, and therefore my recognition that on my level it comes with more obligations. I recognize that on my level I have more obligations. One of my obligations is that not only do I mourn throughout the 3 weeks, but I mourn throughout the entire year over the loss of the Beis HaMikdash. Someone on my level has to do it. I have no choice. Ano Gavra Rabba. I'm a great individual. My level is so great that it requires me to mourn throughout the entire year, not only during the 3 weeks. That's the Gemara. But it seems odd that if the reason why we're mourning the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash is because of the tragedies, the tragedy of the Beis HaMikdash and all the subsequent tragedies that are rooted in the Beis HaMikdash. So why does someone have to be so great to mourn the Beis HaMikdash? It seems if we go through just Jewish history on a national level, on a personal level, there's enough tragedies, enough calamities throughout Jewish history that there's enough that we could really make every day of the year a day of mourning. So why is it that's only someone who's great? Only someone who's great recognizes the tragedies. Each person, on a national again and on a personal level, suffered enough tragedies that he himself, we don't have to be so great. Maybe it was back then. They didn't have as many tragedies, but it seems that's not the answer. Why are we mourning? Why is it only appropriate for someone so great? From the Corbin, we have from the Corbin to the Crusades, from the Crusades to Tachvatat. We go throughout history just tragedy after tragedy, and yet the Gemara tells us, and it's clear, only a great person, only someone who stands out, who's a leader, has the ability, has the right to mourn beyond the 3 weeks, beyond the Tish B'Av and its surrounding days. Everyone else should just focus and just mourn on Tish B'Av. If the reason why we're mourning for the tragedies, it seems that one should be able to mourn throughout the whole year. There's a Gemara in Chagiga. The Gemara in Chagiga brings a pasuk that Yirmiyah said when he described the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And there Yirmiyah tells us, why should one cry? The pasuk says, "V'dema tidma," that tears will flow freely. "V'terid eini dima," and my eyes will drip tears. Ki nishba eved Hashem, because the servant of Hashem has been captured, meaning the Jewish people who are servants of Hashem, they have been captured. If the Gemara says, if you look at the pasuk, there are 3 times the word dema means tear. there are three words that have that shorish, that root of Daled Mem Ayin. Vadema, Tidma, and Eini Dima. The three times the pasuk says the word tears, that tears, and the pasuk and the Gemara explains that these three tears really represent three cryings or three reasons to cry. And the Gemara goes through what are the three reasons. One tear, one reason why we cry is over the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. That's the first tear of the pasuk. That's the first reason why we cry. The second reason why we cry is over the second tears. Is over the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. That's the second dema. That's the second tear. It's the second reason why we cry. The first Beis Hamikdash, the second Beis Hamikdash. And finally, the last tears is because they were exiled. Because they were no longer, because the Jewish nation was no longer able to be in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel. That's the third reason we cry. But it just seems so strange, because the pasuk really gives us a different reason. The reason why we cry, the pasuk says, is because we're captured. That means we're subjugated over by other nations. It's much worse to be subjugated by another nation than just not able to live on one's homeland. It's much more painful to be under the control of a different nation, to have one's life dictated by another nation, than just not be able to live at home. So why do we cry over the fact that? So I understand the destruction of the first temple, the destruction of the second temple. But why are we crying over the fact that we're not able to live in the land of Israel? If there's a much greater reason to cry, that we're subjugated by other nations. It seems that the Gemara is telling us that's not enough of a reason to cry that we're subjugated by nations. It's much worse to be no longer able to live in the land of Israel than to be controlled and be subjugated and one's life dictated by another nation. If the reason why we cry over the loss of the Beis Hamikdash, over the destruction, is because of the ensuing tragedies, so one of the tragedies is that we're subjugated. So it seems again from this Gemara that Yirmiyah tells us explicitly that the reason why we cry, three times the pasuk says Dema, the three times the pasuk, three reasons why we cry, is not because that we're of the tragedies of the Jewish people, or not only because of the tragedies of the Jewish people, but there seems to be a different reason. The way Yirmiyah describes it, the first Beis Hamikdash, the second Beis Hamikdash, and the fact that we're not able to live in the land of Israel. So why is it then, why do we mourn the destruction of the temples? It's well known, it's written in many different svarim, that the purpose of this world, we know this world, like the Mishnah and Avos tells us, this world is like a passageway to the next world. And this world, our job in this world, is really to perfect ourselves through learning, through mitzvahs, through kindness, through prayer. In this world we perfect ourselves. And after we've perfected ourselves, and then we're able to go into the next world, and then benefit from all that all the struggles, all that we've invested in perfecting ourselves. And we know how difficult it is in this world. We have so many things that are important, that one can't really just sit in a corner away from everything and just work on perfecting themselves. And the Rambam writes in Hilchas Tshuva, he says, and this is the reason, Nis'avu Kol Yisrael, and this is the reason why all the Jewish people yearned and desired Nevi'im, the prophets, v'chachameim liyamais HaMashiach. That's why the greatest leaders, the chachamim, the sages, and the Nevi'im, the prophets themselves, that's why they mourned for the Beis Hamikdash. That's why they yearned for it to come again, liyamais HaMashiach, for Mashiach to come. Why? Kedei sheyenuchu because then we won't be subjugated by the other nations. Then we won't have to pay 13% tax, and we'll be able to sit and learn and perfect ourselves and do mitzvahs. And therefore, as a result, we'll be able to be zocha, we'll be able to merit going into the next world. And that's the Rambam explains that the reason why we yearn for the restoration of the two temples is because this new freedom will allow us to devote ourselves entirely to Torah, the study of Torah, and as a result, then we'll be able to merit the world to come. And that's the reason why we mourn, and that's the reason why we yearn for the coming of Mashiach. Rabbi Victor Miller explains that the Rambam doesn't just mean learning. He doesn't refer only to Torah study, but the reason why we yearn for the temple to come back is because along with the temple came opportunities for us to perfect ourselves. These opportunities aren't available as much now as they were when the Beis Hamikdash was around, and that's why we yearn for the temple once again to be restored, because then the opportunities will be much more available for us to then perfect ourselves. In our times, again, we have so much time is spent on necessary pursuits that take us away from focusing on elevating ourselves and perfecting ourselves, and that's just the reality in this world. But when Mashiach comes, then we'll have much more time, things will be much more available, opportunities will be much more prevalent, and therefore we'll be able to perfect ourselves. And that's why we yearn for the coming of Mashiach. And the truth is, if we study that period of Mashiach, when the Beis Hamikdash was around, it's not only just the fact that we don't have time now, that we have so many things that are necessary, that there are so many things that are needed just for daily life, that take precedence over, that we don't have this opportunity, this luxury of just sitting and perfecting ourselves. We don't have this luxury of just meditating somewhere out in the woods. We don't have that. We have so many necessary things that come first. But there were other things as well that were available when the temple was around. We had the prophets. We had the Beis Hamikdash, and we also had living in the land of Israel. If we think about it, if someone wants to perfect himself, what's the greatest asset that he could have? What's the greatest thing any individual wants to perfect himself, who wants to become great? What's the greatest thing that he could have?
Humility.
Humility. That's someone already great has. How does he get to that stage? So I don't know. Could be. This is just a thought. But if someone wants to perfect himself, if he knows what's right and wrong in every situation, if he knows the two voices inside his head, the two voices that are arguing back and forth, whose voice belongs to who, then he'll always know what's right and wrong. At least he'll know right and wrong. Could be he won't always be able to choose the right thing, but at least he'll know. If someone has a question, should I go now to davening or help my wife? Which one comes first? That's a question. What? Davening? I don't know. Some people would say wife. It depends who you ask. Who knows? Could be depends on the situation. Another, learning with a chavruser, you go to complete a minyan. There's a minyan there with 9 people. You could complete the minyan, but you have a chavruser. So what comes first? All these things are struggles, and there's so many different questions that a person has that a person doesn't know what's necessarily the right thing or the wrong thing to do. So how does he choose? How does he know what's right? So it used to be in those days that he would be able to go to a Navi, to go to a prophet, and that prophet would tell him exactly what does Hashem want. He'll be able to go to a prophet. That's one of the things that prophecy allowed us to have, this ability to know always what's right. And there's more. Every person we know has a mission in this world. That means it's an amazing thing, but a person could spend his whole life working on not getting angry, let's say. And he'll be told that he'll come up to Shemayim, and he'll say that he missed the boat. That wasn't what you're supposed to work on. You're never really an angry person anyways. You were supposed to work on doing chesed. And it could be the other way around. The person supposed to work on doing chesed, and then he comes up to the next world and he finds out, chesed, that wasn't your challenge. You were supposed to work on davening. And a person could go his entire life and find out that he did the wrong thing. It used to be, and it comes out that he didn't accomplish what he was supposed to accomplish in this world. It used to be, the Gemara writes in Mishlei, that it used to be that a person, whenever he didn't know, every person used to go to a Navi, and the Navi would tell him, this is your mission in this world. And he would know exactly what he's supposed to do in this world. One person will be told, you should be a rabbi. Another person will be told, you be a doctor. Another person says, you work on giving, work on kindness. Another person will be said, you work on humbleness. Each person will be told exactly what he's supposed to do. what an amazing thing that you know exactly what to do. You know exactly whose voice is in your head, who's saying what. And again, all that came with prophecy. And even if a person didn't want to go to a prophet, the prophet would come to him. If a person didn't do the right thing, made the wrong choice, and started deviating from the path, and such a person obviously doesn't want to go to a prophet, the prophet would come to him, and the prophet would basically ask him, like, what's up? Right? Yirmiyah, half of Yirmiyah, Yeshaya, they're all rebuke to the Jewish nation. And you couldn't tell the prophet, because you couldn't make excuses, because the prophet knew. There was no way to fool it. And even just the idea that knowing that someone had the ability to know what happened. They say stories that certain Rav Avuchatzera, he'd be able to look at you and see exactly what a person did or didn't do. So to go to such a person is scary. If a person knows that he's going to such a person, the week before he's perfect. Now this is the idea with prophecy as well. Even if you didn't go to a prophet, and you didn't ask him what the mission, you didn't ask him what the right thing to do in the world was, just knowing that there was an individual who, even if you didn't go to him, but he had the ability to come to you and know exactly what was right or wrong about a person, and be able to tell whether the excuse was real or not real. Such a thing is for a person to reach perfection, to attain perfection, was such an amazing asset, and that was lost when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Another thing that we had when the Beis Hamikdash was around, just the Beis Hamikdash itself, the Zohar tells us that when a person would go to the Beis Hamikdash and he'll see the Kohen Gadol wearing the tzitz, just seeing the tzitz on the Kohen Gadol, that golden plate that says Kodesh LaHashem on the Kohen Gadol's head, just seeing that, he would do tshuva. Just seeing that was awe-inspiring, that it would cause him to do tshuva. And the rest, the avoda, just watching the Kohanim perform the avoda, would also have an effect on a person. We know that there's different levels of faith. There's the highest level of faith is tangible faith. It's called emunah chushis, that you're able to feel literally like Hashem is with you. You're able to walk down the street with Hashem. It was said, Rabbi Avigdor Miller says, that when a person saw the Kohanim performing the avoda, he saw the way they walked, he saw how careful they were carrying the blood, he saw just the way they offered up an animal, they did a sacrifice, they did the avoda. It would be so impressive that when a person would leave the Beis Hamikdash, when he would leave the Temple Mount, he didn't leave alone at that point. He came by himself, but he left with Hashem. That he left walking with Hashem. It was tangible. He felt Hashem. And after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, obviously there was no more avoda. So this ability just to walk into a place and just have one's level of emunah, as one level of faith, be raised to the highest level, is unbelievable. That was lost. That's no longer there. And then living in Eretz Yisrael. Ever since the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, so then the Jewish nation have been guests by other host countries. Each year we've been through many different countries, Spain, and basically every country almost in the world. When someone's eating by someone else's table, no matter what the host says, he does not disagree. He agrees. He has to. He's eating by his table. The Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us that one of the reasons, he asked the question, Korach was able to amass a rebellion of 250 men, most of them from the tribe of Reuven. Reuven wasn't going to get kahuna. Reuven wasn't a Levi. There was no way, they had nothing to gain. So why did they do it? It doesn't make sense. Why would they risk their life against Moshe Rabbeinu with nothing to gain? The odds don't make sense. It's not worth it. They have nothing to gain. The Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us is because what it used to be, Korach was brilliant. He used to arrange meals, parties, and they would all come to his house, and then he would say whatever he had to say, and at someone's house you can't argue. So they would agree, and eventually this had an impact on them. And then therefore they followed Korach, and they listened, and they as well joined the rebellion, because they were guests at his table. And so are we in Gullus. So we're guests at other countries. There's a Gemara, the Gemara tells us that anyone who lives outside of Eretz Yisrael is as if he served idolatry. And the pasuk, it says, what's the source of this? Dovid HaMelech says, I'm going now to, when he was running away from Shaul, he had to go out to another country, and he says over there, I'm serving idolatry. Why is he serving idolatry? Dovid HaMelech obviously didn't bow down to an idol. So why would he say that? So Rabbi Victor Miller explains that's what the Gemara is telling us. That if even someone, the most frum Jew, someone like a Dovid HaMelech, if he goes to a nation that serves idolatry, if he goes into a culture and he benefits from a culture that serves idolatry, then there's a part of him serving idolatry as well. He's not going to bow down, but some of him is serving idolatry, and that's as gullus as we go through the different nations. Also, we guessed by them, and therefore we influenced by them, and we don't have, and therefore we're also affected, and that takes away our ability to reach perfection. And this is why we mourn over the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. We weep over the loss of prophecy which guide us in our quest to perfection. We cry over the loss of the temple which made our faith tangible. And we lament over the fact that we have our land removed from us, and therefore we're subject to the influence by the other nations. And that's why it's appropriate only for great sages to weep. And that's why that's why these sages got upset at Eliezer Zeira and said, what are you doing? You're not someone it's not befitting of you to mourn. You're not holding on the level where you mourn. Only someone whose life's focus is to come close to Hashem. Only someone who used all the available opportunities in this world and just feels, I'm stuck, there's nothing left for me to grab on, there's no other opportunity for me because I don't have the Beis HaMikdash, there's no other opportunity, I used whatever I could in this world, now I just need a Beis HaMikdash for another opportunity, for another chance to come closer to Hashem. Only someone such a person who feels the lack of a Mikdash, only that person, only of the great sages, could mourn the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And this is what the sages were telling Eliezer Zeira. You're not there. You have so much opportunity in this world. You don't feel the lack of the Mikdash. You don't feel that's missing from you. You didn't use up all the opportunities in this world. We have so much opportunities that isn't used. Use those first. And after you use everything, you become as great as you could, and the only thing that's missing is the Beis HaMikdash. Then you could begin to mourn. Right now it's not befitting of you to mourn. And that's what Eliezer Zeira was told by the great sages. So if that's true, so why do we mourn? Chazal set up that 3 weeks, right? During these 3 weeks, and it gets more serious, it becomes more intense as we approach Tisha B'Av. 3 weeks become the 9 days. The 9 days become Erev Tisha B'Av. The Erev Tisha B'Av becomes Tisha B'Av itself. We don't shower. We don't eat meat. These are the basic minimum that we do to mourn the temple. If the only reason, if the only people are befitting to mourn, who is befitting for them to mourn, is great sages like Eliezer Zeira, so what are we doing? Why are we mourning, and why is it mandatory for us to mourn? It just doesn't fit with who we are. We're not Eliezer Zeira, we're not the great sages of the times of the Gemara, so why are we mourning over the temple? Why did Chazal institute these 3 weeks? During these 3 weeks, there are two types of mourning that we do. There's 2 types of mourning over the temple. We have someone like the great sages, like Eliezer Zeira, who mourns throughout the entire year. Someone like that feels the loss of the Beis HaMikdash throughout the entire year. The opportunities that he has in this world just aren't enough for him. There's so much more he wants to grow, but he just can't because the Beis HaMikdash isn't here, the Kohanim aren't here, they're no longer living in Eretz Yisrael, they're under the influence of other nations. That's someone who mourns throughout the entire year. And then there's the mourning during the 3 weeks. That everyone has to mourn. But that mourning is not over that's a whole different type of mourning. During the 3 weeks, Chazal gave those who don't feel the loss, who haven't used up the opportunities, who don't need the Beis HaMikdash to grow. Those who don't feel the loss, they were given an opportunity to incorporate and to integrate the values of those who do feel the loss. One of the questions a person asks is when he goes up to after 120, he's asked the question of Tzibisali Yeshua. Did you yearn? Did you look forward to the coming of Mashiach? Did you yearn for the salvation? Did you wait for Mashiach to come? The Rambam writes in the 13 Principles of Faith, Ani mamin be'emunah shalema b'biyas HaMashiach, that I believe with perfect faith that Mashiach will come. If you look at where the Rambam wrote in Perek Chelek, he adds a lot there. It's not enough just to believe. You have to yearn. One of to believe in Mashiach is not how the Rambam defines that principle. It's not enough to believe, the Rambam writes. A person has to yearn and desire and wait for Mashiach. To believe Mashiach is coming, that's not enough. One has to wait for it and yearn for it. There's a difference between yearning and waiting. When someone yearns for something, it shows that it has value to him. If someone waits or just believes in it, that's belief. But if someone yearns and waits and desires and just wants the coming or that thing, that shows it has value to them. And this is the opportunity we have during the 3 weeks. This is what the point of the 3 weeks are. The point of the mourning on the 3 weeks, the 9 days on Tisha B'Av itself. It's to move from passive belief to active longing. That's what Tisha B'Av's about. There's a story that said, a well-known story, that after the wall was captured, after the Kosel was captured, so there were two groups of soldiers. There were two groups of soldiers that were crying by the Kosel. So one group of soldiers were crying because they captured the wall, and then there was a secular soldier who was crying. His friend asked him, "What are you crying about? Do you understand what's going on?" So he says, "Ani boche b'shvil she'ani lo boche." I'm crying because I don't know why I'm crying. That's why I'm crying. In a certain sense, that's the Tisha B'Av. There's certain people who understand throughout the entire year, the great sages, Eliezer Ze'ira, who understands throughout the entire year why we mourn. They mourn because they don't have the opportunities to grow anymore, as much as they strive to grow, but they're limited. The Beis HaMikdash isn't here. Emunah Chushis, tangible Emunah, is much more difficult to come by. Prophecy is no longer available. They mourn throughout the entire year. They cry because they know why they're crying. And then there's us. Then there's a person who doesn't know why necessarily, doesn't feel the loss of opportunities. So he cries, though he knows why he's crying. He's crying because he doesn't feel that loss. And during the Tisha B'Av, he has this opportunity to integrate and integrate the values, incorporate the values of those who do cry throughout the entire year. And this is the reason why Chazal instituted the 3 weeks in Tisha B'Av, to give everyone the opportunity to also have the outlook of those who cry throughout the entire year.